Hi, it's Miss Kristy. We're reading Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. And this is chapter 18, Months of Peril. And of course, peril is danger. Linda has run away and she's in hiding. Her grandma doesn't know where she is. Her uncle doesn't know where she is. She's hiding at a friend's right now. The search for me was kept up with more perseverance than I had anticipated. I began to think that escape was impossible. I was in great anxiety lest I should implicate the friend who harbored me. I knew the consequences would be frightful, and much as I dreaded being caught, even that seemed better than causing an innocent person to suffer for my kindness to me. A week had passed in terrible suspense when any pursuers came into such close vicinity that I concluded they had tracked me to my hiding place. I flew out of the house and concealed myself in a thicket of bushes. There I remained in agony of fear for 2 hours. Suddenly, a reptile of some kind seized my leg. In my fright, I struck a blow which loosened its hold, but I could not tell whether I had killed it. It was so dark. I could not see what it was. I only knew it was something cold and slimy. The pain I felt soon indicated that the bite was poisonous. I was compelled to leave my place of concealment, and I groped my way back into the house. The pain had become intense, and my friend was startled by the look of anguish. I asked her to prepare a poultice of warm ashes and vinegar. I applied it to my leg, which was already much swollen. The application gave me some relief, but the swelling did not abate. The dread of being disabled was greater than the physical pain I endured. My friend asked an old woman who doctored among the slaves what was good for the bite of a snake or a lizard. She told her to steep a dozen coppers in vinegar overnight and applied the cankered vinegar to the inflamed part. I succeeded in cautiously conveying some messages to my relatives. They were harshly threatened and despairing of my having a chance to escape. They advised me to return to my master, ask his forgiveness, and let him make an example of me. But such counsel had no influence on me. When I started upon this hazardous undertaking, I had resolved, come what would, there should be no turning back. Give me liberty or give me death was my motto. And that's a motto that Patrick Henry said when Britain was imposing horrible taxes on the colonists. And he said, we're going to have to fight. Sorry, my cat. My cat. You want to see him? Yay, kitty. Well, he's gone now. Patrick Henry said that because he said we're not going to allow Britain to control us anymore. So he said, give me liberty or give me death. And that's what Linda believes. When my friend contrived to make known to my relatives the painful situation I had been in for 24 hours, they said no more about my going back to my master. Something must be done, and that speedily, but where to turn for help they knew not. God in his mercy raised up a friend in need. Among the ladies who were acquainted with my grandmother was one who had known her from childhood and always been very friendly to her. She had also known my mother and her children and felt interested for them. At this crisis of affairs, she called to see my grandmother, as she not infrequently did. She observed the sad and troubled expression of her face and asked if she knew where Linda was and whether she was safe. My grandmother shook her head without answering. "Come, Aunt Martha," said the kind lady. "Tell me about it. Perhaps I can do something to help you." The husband of this lady held many slaves and bought and sold slaves. So if her husband has slaves, what is her race? Obviously, she's Caucasian, and she's offering help to Grandma, and Grandma has to decide, is this legit or not? She also had a number of her own in her own name, but she treated them kindly and would never allow any of them to be sold. She was like the majority of slaveholders' wives. My grandmother looked... My cat just went out. My grandmother looked earnestly at her. Something in the expression of her face said, "Trust me." And she did trust her. Should she? She listened attentively to the details of my story and sat thinking for a while. Hold on. There's my cat. He's going out. Sorry about the butt picture of my cat. At last she said, "Aunt Martha, I pity you both. If you think there is any chance of Linda's getting to the Free States, I will conceal her for a time. But first, you must solemnly promise that my name shall never be mentioned. If such a thing should come known, it would ruin me and my family. No one in my house must know of it except the cook. She is so faithful that I would trust my own life with her, and I know she likes Linda. It is a great risk, but I trust you no harm will come of it. Get word to Linda to be as ready as soon as it is dark before the patrols are out. I will send the housemaids on errands, and Betty shall go to meet Linda. The place where we were to meet was designated and agreed upon. My grandmother was unable to thank the lady for this noble deed. Overcome by her emotions, she sank on her knees and sobbed like a child. I received a message to leave my friend's house at such an hour and go to a certain place where a friend would be waiting for me. As a matter of prudence, no names were mentioned. I had no means of conjecturing who I was to meet or where I was going. I did not like to move thus blindfolded, but I had no choice. It would not do for me to remain where I was. I disguised myself, summoned up courage to meet the worst, and went to the appointed place. My friend Betty was there. She was the last person I expected to see. We hurried along in silence. The pain in my leg was so intense that it seemed as if I should drop, but fear gave me strength. We reached the house and entered unobserved. Her first words were, "Honey, now you is safe. Dem devils ain't comin' to search dis house. When I get you into Mrs. Safe Place, I will bring some nice hot supper. I spects you need it after all dis skeerin'." The way she's speaking is called regionalism, and it's the way you speak in a particular region and at a particular time period. Betty's vocation led her to think eating the most important thing in life. She did not realize that my heart was too full for me to care much about supper. The mistress came to meet us and led me upstairs to a small room over her own sleeping apartment. Come here, kitty. "She will be safe here, Linda," said she. "I will keep this room to store away things that are out of use." Hold on. Come here. Here's my baby. There's a different cat. Oh, hold on. Oh, sorry. The girls are not accustomed to be sent to it, and they will not suspect anything unless they hear some noise. I always keep it locked, and Betty shall take care of the key. But you must be very careful, for my sake as well as your own, and you must never tell my secret, for it would ruin me and my family. I will keep the girls busy in the morning, that Betty may have a chance to bring your breakfast, but it will not do for her to come to you again till night. I will come to see you sometimes. Keep up your courage. I hope this state of things will not last long." Betty came with the nice hot supper, and the mistress hastened downstairs to keep things straight till she returned. How my heart overflowed with gratitude. Words choked in my throat, but I could have kissed the feet of my benefactress for that deed of Christian womanhood. May God bless her forever. So she is helping her. I went to sleep that night. Hold on. I went to sleep that night with the feeling that I was, for the present, the most fortunate slave in town. Morning came and filled my little cell with light. I thanked the Heavenly Father for this safe retreat. Opposite my window was a pile of feather beds. On the top of these I could lie perfectly concealed and command a view of the street through which Dr. Flint passed to his office. Anxious as I was, I felt a gleam of satisfaction when I saw him. Thus far I had outwitted him, and I triumphed over him. Who can blame slaves for being cunning? They are constantly compelled to resort to it. It is the only weapon of the weak and oppressed against the strength of their tyrants. I was daily hoping to hear that my master had sold my children, for I knew who was on the watch to buy them. But Dr. Flint cared even more for revenge than he did for money. My brother William and the good aunt who had served in his family 20 years and my little Benny and Ellen, who was a little over 2 years old, were thrust into jail as a means of compelling my relatives to give some information about me. So her brother and her kids are now in jail. Dr. Flint's tried to pressure them into saying where Linda is, but they don't know where she is. They really don't. He swore my grandmother shall never see one of them again till I was brought back. They kept these facts from me for several days. When I heard that my little ones were in a loathsome jail, my first impulse was to go to them. I was encountering dangers for the sake of freeing them, and must I be the cause of their death? The thought was agonizing. My benefactress tried to soothe me by telling me that my aunt would take good care of the children while they remained in jail. But it added to my pain to think that the good old aunt, who had always been so kind to her sister's orphan children, should be shut up in prison for no other crime than loving them. I suppose my friends feared a reckless movement on my part, knowing, as they did, that my life was bound up in my children. I received a note from my brother William. It was scarcely legible and ran thus: "Wherever you are, dear sister, I beg of you not to come here. We are all much better off than you are. If you come, you will ruin us all. They would force you to tell where you had been, or they would kill you. Take the advice of your friends, if not for the sake of me and your children, at least for the sake of those you would ruin." Poor William, he also must suffer for being my brother. I took his advice and kept quiet. My aunt was taken out of jail at the end of the month because Mrs. Flint could not spare her any longer. She was tired of being her own housekeeper. It was quite too fatiguing to order her dinner and eat it too. A little sarcasm right there on Linda's part. My children remained in jail, where Brother William did all he could for their comfort. Betty went to see them sometimes and brought me tidings. She was not permitted to enter the jail, but William would hold them up to the grated window while she chatted with them. When she repeated their prattle and told me how they wanted to see their ma, my tears would flow. Old Betty would exclaim, "Lord's child, what you crying 'bout? Dem young uns will kill you dead. Don't be so chicken-hearted. If you does, you will never get through this world." Good old soul. She had gone through the world childless. She had never had little ones to clasp their arms around her neck. She had never seen their soft eyes looking into hers. No sweet little voices had called her mother. She had never pressed her own infants to her heart with the feeling that even in fetters or chains, there was something to live for. How could she recognize my feelings? Betty's husband loved children dearly and wondered why God had denied them to him. He expressed great sorrow when he came to Betty with the tidings that Ellen had been taken out of jail and carried to Dr. Flint's. She had the measles a short time before they carried her to jail, and the disease had left her eyes affected. The doctor had taken her home to attend to them. My children had always been afraid of the doctor and his wife. They had never been inside their house. Poor little Ellen cried all day to be carried back to prison. The instincts of childhood are true. She knew she was loved in jail, and her screams and sobs annoyed Mrs. Flint. Before night, she called one of the slaves and said, "Here, Benny, carry this brat back to jail. I can't stand her noise. If she would be quiet, I should like to keep the little minx. She would make a handy waiting maid for my daughter by and by. But if she stayed here with her white face, I suppose I should either kill her or spoil her. I hope the doctor will sell them as far as wind and water can carry them. As for their mother, her ladyship will find out yet what she gets by running away. She hasn't so much feeling for her children as a cow has for its calf," which is not true. We know that cows love their calves. "If she had, she would have come back long ago to get them out of jail and save all this expense and trouble. The good-for-nothing hussy. When she is caught, she shall stay in jail in irons for 6 months and then be sold to a sugar plantation. I shall see her broke in yet. What do you stand there for, Bill? Why don't you go off with the brat? Mind you, that you don't let any of the nuns speak to her in the street." When these remarks were reported to me, I smiled at Mrs. Flint saying that she should either kill my child or spoil her. I thought to myself, there was very little danger of the latter. I have always considered it as one of God's special providences that Ellen screamed till she was carried back to jail. That same night, Dr. Flint was called to a patient and did not return till near morning. Passing my grandmother, he saw a light in the house and thought to himself, "Perhaps this has something to do with Linda." He knocked, and the door was opened. "What calls you up so early?" said he. "I saw your light, and I thought I would just stop and tell you I have found out where Linda is. I know where to put my hands on her, and I shall have her before 12 o'clock. When he had turned away, my grandmother and my uncle looked anxiously at each other. They did not know whether or not it was merely one of the doctor's tricks to frighten them. In their uncertainty, they thought it was best to have a message conveyed to my friend Betty. Unwilling to alarm her mistress, Betty resolved to dispose of me herself. She came to me and told me to rise and dress quickly. We hurried downstairs and across the yard into the kitchen. She locked the door and lifted up a plank in the floor. A buffalo skin and a bit of carpet were spread for me to lie on, and a quilt thrown over me. "Stay dar," said she. So she's under the floor in the kitchen. "Stay dar," said she, "till I sees if dey know 'bout you. Dey say de devil will put dar hands on you afore 12 o'clock. If dey did know whar you are, dey won't know now. They'll be disappointed this time. That's all I got to say. If dey comes rummaging among my things, they'll get one breast sarcin from dis here inn. In my shallow bed, I had but just room enough to bring my hands to my face." Oh, excuse me, and this is Lyndon's thinking now. "In my shallow bed, I had but just room enough to bring my hands to my face to keep the dust out of my eyes, for Betty walked over me 20 times in an hour, passing from the dresser to the fireplace. When she was alone, I could hear her pronouncing anathemas over Dr. Flint and all his tribe, every now and then saying with a chuckling laugh, "Dis inn's too cute for 'em dis time." When the housemaids were about, she had sly ways of drawing them out that I might hear what they would say. She would repeat stories she had heard about my being in this or that or the other place, to which they would answer that I was not fool enough to be staying around here, that I was in Philadelphia or New York before this time. When all were abed and asleep, Betty raised the plank and said, "Come out, child, come out. Dey don't know nothing about you. 'Twas only white folks' lies to scare the ins." Some days after this adventure, I had a much worse fright. As I sat very still in my retreat above stairs, cheerful visions floated through my mind. I thought Dr. Flint would soon get discouraged and would be willing to sell my children when he lost all hopes of making them means of my discovery. I knew who was ready to buy them. Suddenly, I heard a voice that chilled my blood. The sound was too familiar to me. It had been too dreadful for me not to recognize at once my old master. So she hears Dr. Flint's voice in the house that she's hiding in. He was in the house, and I at once concluded he had come to seize me. I looked round in terror. There was no way to escape. The voice receded. I suppose the constable was with him, and they were searching the house. In my alarm, I did not forget the trouble I was bringing on my generous benefactress, so Linda's now feeling guilty because of the white woman who's hiding her could now be in trouble if they find Linda there. It seemed as if I were born to bring sorrow on all who befriended me, and that was the bitterest drop in the bitter cup of my life. After a while, I heard approaching footsteps. The key was turned in my door. I braced myself against the wall to keep from falling. I ventured to look up, and there stood my kind benefactress alone. I was too much overcome to speak, and sunk down upon the floor. "I thought you would hear your master's voice," she said, "and knowing you would be terrified, I came to tell you there is nothing to fear. You may even indulge in a laugh at the old gentleman's expense. He is so sure you are in New York that he came to borrow $500 to go in pursuit of you. My master had some money to loan on interest. He has obtained it and proposes to start for New York tonight. So for the present, you see you are safe. The doctor will merely lighten his pocket hunting after the bird he has left behind." So Dr. Flint's off to New York. Well, let's find out what happens next.